again, Buckeye Nation. It is time for the Silver Bullets podcast. I am Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
And Chip, man, oh man, do we have some things to discuss. We thought we were going to be doing a little bit of Rose Bowl preview this week, but I think we can push that back to the next show and talk about a lot of different things that we have on our plate. Some very pretty big news coming out of Ohio State since you and I last spoke. And, we could talk a little bit about the Heisman Trophy. We could talk a little bit about some of the stuff going on with the coaching staff. But I did want to start this week, Chip, with something that I didn't get to last week. It was on my list of things to do, but we ended up having a pretty decent length show, and I pushed it back, and then I decided to put it off. But now that we have a show that we really don't have a game to recap or a game to preview, we can maybe get into this a little bit. I have to say that I was more than disappointed in the run-up, the final run-up to the college football playoff decision making and all of the bowl, where all the bowls ended up and all of the selection Sunday stuff, with the fact that Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delany did some things that I don't think you would see out of virtually any other commissioner, in that he really downplayed the importance, maybe not the importance, but he really downplayed Ohio State not getting in and the Big Ten being left out yet again, the Big Ten champion being left out of the 4-team college football playoff. And I just wanted to know if it rubbed you the wrong way as much as it did me, in terms of Jim Delany not fighting for his conference and not necessarily outright lobbying, but at least kind of act like you care a little bit.
Oh, it certainly bothered me. Jim Delany, the perception, I think, among Big Ten fans, probably Ohio State fans, as a result of, as you said, he wasn't outright lobbying, but I think the perception among Big Ten fans that Jim Delany is very much concerned with the bottom line. The additions of Maryland, the additions of Rutgers to the Big Ten seems like, okay, let's just kind of add more money for the Big Ten network, and wasn't really overly concerned about the quality of those teams to the conference as a whole. So the fact that he came out and said that he was content with, in so many words, with how everything came out, certainly rubbed me the wrong way, and it rubbed you the wrong way, and obviously a lot of our listeners the wrong way as well.
Yeah, the main thing for me, Chip, is that this is the commissioner of the league, and he should project some kind of at least, I'm not expecting him to go on a tirade on ESPN about it, but I am expecting him to stick up for his conference and to support his conference in some way. And this just kind of came off as, it's not a big deal that we didn't make the college football playoff again this year, despite the fact that, the Big Ten champion has been on the outside looking in now for a few years. And to me, that's really not acceptable behavior. I mean, if Jim Delany's not going to fight for the Big Ten, then no one is, because we've seen it. We've seen the national media. We've seen how the committee members on the College Football Playoff Committee who abstained, recused themselves because they had a dog in the fight, basically left 10 voters with a decidedly southeastern slant. Who's going to fight for Ohio State if not the Big Ten commissioner? Who's going to fight for the Big Ten schools, not just Ohio State, but any Big Ten school, if not the Big Ten commissioner?
Well, it's certainly, as I said, it seems as though Jim Delany, the perception that I always get from him is that he wants people to believe that he is the smartest person in the room. That's he has a kind of a smugness to him, fairly or unfairly. Maybe maybe I'm mistaken. It just seems as though that Jim Delany's reputation is that he wants people to recognize, something, I'm pretty damn smart, and you should just kind of be grateful that I have come down from Mount Olympus for the moment to, to spend time with you mere mortals while I get back to, after a few moments of spending time with you, then I'm going to get back to the business at hand, which is more eyeballs glued on the Big Ten network, more money going into the Big Ten cash register. When the simple reality is, Jim Delany, if he's not going to go to bat, as you said, for Ohio State, for the Big Ten teams, who is, I would recognize that, yes, Ohio State, they lost by 29 points to Purdue, but why Jim Delany didn't take an opportunity to really shine a spotlight on how the ACC and the SEC are playing 8 conference games while the Big Ten is playing 9. Why is it that certain conferences are playing FCS opponents when the Big Ten is not? That, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It just seems as though those were legitimate things. If you want to exclude Ohio State based on the loss to Purdue, I'm not going to be able to legitimately challenge that. But I think that there's something to be said about the inequality across the conferences, and I'm not going to let the Pac-12 off the hook either, because their commissioner Larry Scott certainly is not earning any kisses and bouquets of praise from the Pac-12 either, because these are the kind of things that we need to highlight. If you're the Big Ten, if you're the Pac-12, you need to point out the inequality across the conferences in in the scheduling, in just by and large, what is leading to the ACC and SEC consistently placing teams. I strongly disagreed with some of the articles about, well, the Big Ten needs to start scheduling FC. No, the Big Ten does not need to start scheduling FCS opponents. And I understand why Gerd wrote how, in the aftermath of the committee's decision, why Gerd wrote that. But no, the Big Ten, if anything, instead of coming down, they need to start shaming the other conferences into scheduling up. And one of the only people who has been within the SEC, believe it or not, who has been actually a champion of 9 conference games is Nick Saban. Nick Saban has been saying we need to actually have 9 conference games. But I'm just saying, like, Jim Delany needs to say, Nick Saban is right. We need to have 9 conference games across the board. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jim Delany needs to be, as you said, a champion of making things consistent across the board for the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where if the playing field isn't even, and it's becoming, to me, a problem in that you've got a built-in recruiting advantage now for Clemson and Alabama, and not just Clemson and Alabama, but I would say Clemson and all of the SEC, basically. If you come here and you do well and you lose one game maybe, you're going to get in. If you're the Big Ten, you might be the champion of your league, but if you have a loss, you're taking your chances. It's a built-in recruiting advantage for them, and Delaney's doing nothing about that. And he's done nothing but just kind of be very milquetoast about the whole thing.
It certainly doesn't help that the second to last, I guess you could say the second to last week of the regular season, when the Big Ten, you have teams now, granted, Ohio State they were not at their best, but Ohio State at least was playing against a team that was on the cusp of being bowl eligible when they escaped in overtime against Maryland
Mm-hmm.
when you had Alabama playing the Citadel. And I have nothing but respect for the Citadel as an institution. The fact that, okay, you're talking a military institution, but the mere fact is you're talking FCS opponents. Why is it that, I mean, even people on ESPN, they take them to task, but then they conveniently forget 2 weeks later, among them Kirk Herbstreit, not pointing out, you know, the fact that the SEC is playing FCS opponents in late November when the Big Ten is playing conference games against each other. Why isn't that an example of the scheduling hypocrisy? And that's where Jim Delany could say, why is it that you guys on your playoff show are talking about how Georgia is so deserving, but 2 weeks ago Georgia was playing an FCS team.
Mm-hmm.
Why? That's what I'm saying. That's where Jim Delany needs to come to show the Big Ten that he means business.
That is longtime Georgia Bulldogs booster Kirk Herbstreit to you, Chip.
Whatever he is, all I know is Kirk Herbstreit is a frequent guest on the Buckeye Cruise for Cancer. And all I'm going to suggest is that it should be very, very interesting if he makes a return appearance on such a worthwhile charity, vacation. What kind of reception he's going to get based on the way that he was championing Georgia. And this is okay, 2 years in a row. Like last year, he was championing Alabama at the expense of Ohio State. And I'm not suggesting that Ohio State, last year when they lost to Iowa, I mean, let's just face it. I mean, they played poorly and they had 2 losses. They had 2 losses and Alabama only had the 1. All right, that's fine. But don't try and tell me that, okay, that losing is ever better than winning. I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. And that's, to me, is so just, I mean, it just, the idea of, okay, well, they had a better loss than Ohio State's win. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And that's where Jim Delany having him on, instead of him, like, as you said, kind of like this milquetoast approach of, okay, well, I certainly understand it. And we certainly don't want to go to 8. And, I'm not saying he was cowering, but just kind of, basically saying, oh, don't interrupt me while I'm trying to count the money that Rutgers and Maryland have brought in, because that's kind of the impression he gave to me and obviously to a lot of other Big Ten fans around the country.
Well, the stupid thing about it is it's not an either or. You can be that way and count your beans, and you can bring in money for the conference and bring in, eyeballs to the Big Ten network and sell the Big Ten network to more and more cable distributors around the country and still be a champion for your own conference. They're not mutually exclusive, and there's no reason not to do it, and you don't have to badmouth anybody to do it. You just have to extol the virtues of, what you're doing and what you stand for, and it's kind of ridiculous. You mentioned the Maryland game. That's the classic trap game. It's right between Michigan State and Michigan. It's going to always be the valley between the two mountains in terms of, hype and how excited the team and how up the team gets for it, and in terms of mentality. And that's a lot different than, playing the Citadel before your rivalry game. It's a whole different animal, and there's no real reason for these SEC teams to continue to get away with scheduling like this, and very little is made out of it really outside of the Midwest. It's not. I mean, it isn't an even playing field. It isn't. We have our term for it. Chicken beef Saturday. But
yes,
there's really no incentive for the SEC to change their scheduling. There was an incentive when Ohio State was rewarded for scheduling tougher opponents by beating Oklahoma and then getting into the college football playoff, even though they didn't win their conference. There was a precedent that we're going to reward this kind of thing. And then, like you and I talked about last week, the goalposts move. They always move. And they moved in this particular – they've set a precedent, and then they blew the precedent up.
Yeah, we were led to believe after the formation of the college football playoff as college football fans that strength of schedule was going to be a prime component in the evaluation process.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw it with Ohio State in the immediate aftermath. You saw games being scheduled, for example, in the very near future. Ohio State will be playing Oregon. Ohio State's going to be playing Notre Dame. Ohio State's going to be playing Texas. They're going to be playing Boston College. I mean, all of these legitimate opponents that you would think would foster the idea that, Ohio State is actually trying to play legitimately strong competition in addition to their regularly scheduled Big Ten opponents.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been a strong advocate of Ohio State playing an in-state MAC opponent, at least one, at the beginning of the season is kind of, all right, that's a financial reward for those MAC schools like Miami University, like Ohio U, like Cincinnati's not in the MAC, but Toledo, Bowling Green, rewarding those schools financially, while by the same token, all right, let's kind of look at this as a tune-up for Ohio State to get ready for either that more difficult opponent maybe in the next game, like Oregon, Boston College, Notre Dame, whoever it might be, as well as a good prep for the Big Ten opponents. Now, if you were to tell me, all right, we're going to play, I'm just trying to think, back in 2013, Ohio State played Florida A&M and squashed them 77-0. Even Urban Meyer said this is the kind of game that probably shouldn't even be played.
Mm-hmm.
And you were to tell me that we're going to play Florida A&M the week before we either go to or play that team up north. Why is it that is not being condemned? When Alabama or Auburn or Georgia or whoever, fill in the blank SEC team does it.
Mm-hmm.
Why, it's completely looked the other way. And it's just that, to me, that's where Jim Delany is falling short by not pointing that out about how that is, as you said, the reason why SEC teams and ACC teams continue to do it is because the college football playoff committee, they're not being held accountable. And that's where Jim Delany as the Big Ten commissioner, as well as Larry Scott in the Pac-12, and any other commissioner needs to, the Big 12, they need to point out the idea that all these other conferences are playing legitimate opponents, whereas the SEC and ACC are being rewarded for it.
Yeah, and you would not hear it if the roles were reversed. You would not hear the end of it. If Ohio State was playing Michigan State, then Mercer, and then Michigan, it would be ridiculed nationwide, no doubt in my mind.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
So let's get a commissioner in here that's going to stick up for his own conference. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Mr. Delany, you have failed this conference. All right. Before we get into the coaching changes that came down last Tuesday, since we're already on the on the sort of the grumpy old Buckeye side of things right now, I want to talk a little bit about the Heisman race. And I want to talk more specifically. I want to talk a little bit about, now you and I kind of knew going in
mm-hmm.
that Dwayne Haskins had a lot of ground to make up because of the fact that Tua and Kyler Murray were the prohibitive favorites going into the last several weeks. I would say the majority of the people who sent in their votes before the conference championship games were probably Tua and maybe some Kyler Murray. But we knew that Dwayne Haskins wasn't going to win. But the blatant disrespect for a finalist was something that I have never seen in any Heisman race. It was these outlets I saw for specifically on social media, even as late as the day of the Heisman ceremony, were posting on social media, which of these two should win, Kyler or Tua? And here's the tail of the tape. And literally, there's three finalists, and they're talking about these two guys. I saw it from NBC, I saw it from ESPN, and I even saw it from SB Nation. Those are just the three that stuck out to me. Others had maybe a little lesser versions of the same thing. But by every metric that you can measure statistically, other than quarterback rushing, Dwayne Haskins was either as good or better than those two guys. And you heard nothing about him. And I think there was even some short shrift on screen time that Reese Davis took to Twitter to defend, saying that it's really hard to interview three people. This from a guy who was regularly on a show with like 5 studio hosts. So, I mean, first of all, Chip, have you ever seen any Heisman finalists get so shoved off into the corner as Dwayne Haskins was?
No, not at all. And it just begs the question, why did you even invite him to New York City? I'm sure that Dwayne enjoyed being at the New York Stock Exchange with Kyler and Tua because I saw that.
Mm.
But it really made you wonder, why did you even invite this guy if it was such a foregone conclusion that he was not truly within that realm of up for the Heisman Trophy finalist discussion? Made you kind of question what was why even. I know statistically, because I agree with you, statistically he was certainly worthy of being in the discussion, but it's the complete overshadowing as well as blatant disregard and disrespect that was shown to him throughout the entire Heisman Trophy presentation made you wonder, what were you even thinking?
I mean, it almost came down to really just a matter of, it was almost like we're dismissing Ohio State from this conversation, whether it's the Heisman, whether it's the college football playoff. We don't want to hear from Ohio State. And we've made up our minds, and you're not going to change our minds. And now we've gotten to this thing in society, especially with the rise of social media, where opinions are now a sport. And you have to have an opinion, and you have to cement that opinion, and you have to be right. And being right is important, and you can never back off from being right. If you have to stick to what you say. And I think that that's infected, in some respects, it's affected the college football playoff committee. It's certainly affected the Heisman Trophy race, and and other things too. It's like, I've been telling you all season that this guy is the best. And even though he kind of had a bad last month of the year, or a down last month of the year, and these other people had good last months of the year, if I tell you that this guy's no longer the best, then I was wrong all along, and I can't be wrong, so I have to stick to that, and so my vote goes to Tua. And so, that's where you see Tua get on 92% or 91% or whatever it was of the ballots, and Dwayne Haskins gets on 62% of the ballots, which is ridiculous. that disparity, a 30% ballot disparity between two players who, I don't even know that it's arguable that Haskins had better numbers, especially against the top 30 defenses in the country. But they can't admit they were wrong, so they have to stick to what they've been saying all along. And I think the college football committee is the same way. They it's Alabama, Clemson, Alabama, Clemson. We had Oklahoma up top, and we can't waver from this, because then that means we were wrong, and we can't have been wrong.
Right. I mean, the way I look at it is that at the beginning of the season, we talked about this last week, that the idea that Dwayne Haskins was facing an uphill battle with regards to the whole Heisman Trophy race. Mm-hmm. That by and large, at the beginning of the season, it was Tua's trophy to lose. It seemed a foregone conclusion that Tua was the best player in the country, and Dwayne Haskins was in the discussion. And as you said accurately, that Dwayne, with regards to his Heisman Trophy candidacy, it kind of fell off mid-season, fairly or unfairly. Mm-hmm. That by and large, around the time that Ohio State started to be kind of whispered, okay, well, how good are they really? And Dwayne's performance kind of leveled off. And it just seemed as though, all right, from the Purdue loss, as well as some shaky performances against Nebraska, at Michigan State, that Dwayne was kind of, all right, he's not really a Heisman Trophy guy. And it was mid-season that Kyler Murray's discussion kind of started to pick up. And that's when Tua started, the injury issues and not being able to complete a full game. And, oh, by the way, Dwayne is really turning it on at the end of the year. But let's talk about Kyler and Tua. And everything that I have read online, it seems as though the majority of the Heisman ballots were mailed in or voted on prior to the conference championship games. So in other words, when you needed, as Urban Meyer likes to say, when I need you the most, when with the tougher competition, what you would expect, Dwayne Haskins playing against the number one statistically rated defense, that was completely considered an afterthought. Dwayne Haskins in a nationally televised game against Northwestern, that was completely disregarded. So everyone seemed to ignore how Kyler Murray, he had a great year, but he was Dwayne Haskins, his performances were just as good, if not better, in a number of categories, and everyone seemed to magnify Tua's performance at the beginning of the season and disregarded Dwayne's superior performances at the end of the season. So, I mean, we could go on and on. It just seems as though no matter what, Dwayne Haskins, I keep going back to it. Why did you invite this guy if you weren't going to give him any kind of consideration whatsoever?
Right. I mean, at least have the three guys and their numbers. But I think the problem there is, if you put those three guys and their numbers there, then people go, oh, wait, Dwayne Haskins' numbers are actually better than some of these other numbers. So it becomes a thing where we have to only talk about these two guys, because if we throw Dwayne in there, then people are going to see that the numbers are really good. So we're just going to freeze him out and just talk about Tua and Kyler, because they're the ones that are going to win anyway, one of them. It was a real slap in the face, and credit to Dwayne Haskins, because he took it like a champ. He was very respectful. He was, humble, his normal self. And I just felt bad for him, because he deserved better than that. And, he put up 900 yards after a lot of people had sent in their Heisman votes. He puts up 900 plus yards against two of the better defenses that any of the three candidates, finalists, faced. And, Michigan and Northwestern. Michigan was the number one ranked defense. Northwestern was not as highly ranked, but it was a solid defense that hadn't been torched like that to the tune of 500 yards passing certainly. And meanwhile, Kyler was out there, shredding a West Virginia defense that I'm honestly pretty sure the staff of the Ozone could score 14 points against.
I will just merely say that when it comes to the Heisman Trophy, I'm kind of in that Tom Orr category of not really caring about them ever since Orlando Pace was denied the Heisman Trophy back in 1996. And anyone who went, if you talk about the best player in the country, anyone that can remember 20 plus years ago, Orlando Pace certainly was in that discussion. And yes, he was invited to the Heisman Trophy, but was not awarded it. And before anyone says, all right, well, you're so hell bent on Ohio State players winning the Heisman Trophy, I would make the same argument a few years ago when Ndamukong Suh of Nebraska was denied the Heisman Trophy. Anyone who saw the performance that Ndamukong Suh back when Nebraska was still a member of the Big 12, the performance he had against Texas and Colt McCoy would have Suh was the best player in the country as well. So to me, I understand it's very difficult to qualify offensive lineman or defensive lineman as being the quote unquote best player in the country. But if you really know college football and can look and evaluate, players, their contributions on the field, and I'm certainly not trying to take anything away from Kyler Murray, from Tua Tagovailoa, from Dwayne Haskins. Sometimes there are players like an Ndamukong Suh, like an Orlando Pace, who certainly are worthy of being in the discussion for the Heisman Trophy. It will always be one of those things where if Nick Bosa hadn't been injured earlier in the year, would Nick Bosa have been in the discussion? I highly doubt it. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I really don't get too worked up over the Heisman Trophy because I just think it's been such a long time that a quote-unquote true best player in college football has really been in the discussion. So, if anything, I just keep going back to the fact if Dwayne Haskins wasn't truly up for consideration, I'm sure he enjoyed a trip to New York City. What college age male wouldn't enjoy an opportunity to go to New York City and hobnob with the Heisman Trophy finalists and get a chance to visit the New York Stock Exchange? But I completely agree with you. I think he handled it with true class and dignity, the way that he was completely shunned and overlooked unfairly by the national media, in my opinion.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm with you on the Heisman Trophy. I really didn't expect Dwayne Haskins to win. I wasn't really concerned with who did win. I just was concerned about the way that the national media and really the country at large kind of treated it like there were only two guys there when there were in fact three. So, good discussion, Chip. Why don't we talk about the big thing that happened the day after we recorded last week, and that is that Urban Meyer has announced that he was going to resign as head football coach at Ohio State and retire. And immediately after the Rose Bowl, and that Ohio State had hired Ryan Day to become the new head football coach at Ohio State after Urban steps down. And it was sort of a historic occasion on a lot of fronts, partly because Ohio State is not an institution that has historically given assistant coaches the head coaching job. They usually go out after somebody that has head coaching experience. And of course, Ryan Day has 3 games of that as an interim head coach. So that was a little bit different. And it was just it kind of made some things click into place. The emotional end to the Michigan game, and there were some question marks. Of course, mid-season, when people were giving Urban grief about, is he coming back? Urban basically said, I intend to coach next year. I intend to be the head coach at Ohio State. And then that narrative kind of changed at the end of the season. And, now we know that Urban Meyer will not be back next year and that Ryan Day will be the head coach. First, let me ask you how were you surprised by the news, or were you surprised by the timing of the news, or how did you react to the entire announcement? Both the Ryan Day thing and the Urban Meyer thing.
Well, I'm not surprised by the news based on the way that Urban Meyer talked about the recruiting aspect. And by that, during the press conference, he referenced how the early signing period is rapidly approaching and how someone, when they sign their letter of intent, if a coaching change takes place, how that player then has the freedom to leave. And between Gene Smith stressing the continuity of what Ohio State has built under the previous 7 seasons under Urban Meyer's direction, combine that with the importance of recruiting that Urban Meyer has continually stressed, how that's the lifeblood of any college football program. It made sense. I know that we had talked about the idea of Ryan Day as the coach in waiting earlier in the season,
Mm-hmm.
and for what it's worth, this is not meant as anything against Ryan Day. I'm always of the opinion that Ohio State is such a large job that I would have preferred going out and having a national search. But when you hear Urban Meyer and Gene Smith talk about the continuity, the recruiting, everything, it certainly made sense. The only reason just going back to the idea of an experienced head coach, in that same press conference, Urban Meyer, it was brought up about how Urban Meyer was around roughly the same age as Ryan Day currently is when Urban Meyer became a first-time head coach at Bowling Green. And Urban Meyer was asked, "Would you have been able to have had this job at that age?" And Urban Meyer said, "Oh no," and there was a lot of chuckles. But Urban Meyer quickly said, that Ryan Day has been in it at this level with responsibilities much more than Urban Meyer had at that comparable age. So
Mm-hmm.
I have confidence in Gene Smith. I'm sure that this is kind of falling in that idea of that Bob Stoops to Lincoln Riley transition in Oklahoma, how Dabo Swinney down in Clemson being from internal. Let's face it, there's more than one way to build a successful program. I am optimistic that with a lot of the key infrastructure being held in place, being Mickey Marotti as the strength and conditioning coach, Mark Fantoni with recruiting, Brian Baltellini on the football ops, Ryan Stamper on the player real life Wednesdays, all those things that go behind the scenes beyond the X's and O's that Ryan Day is going to be able to take full advantage of. I think he is well positioned to keep Ohio State at a high level. It just remains to be seen if, when it comes to the game time decisions, and it's no longer the idea of, well, after game 3, Urban Meyer's coming back. It just, when it's 4th and 1 against Michigan State next October, how Ryan Day handles that's kind of where we're gonna, the idea of if how he handles it is going to be something that you and I and all the Ohio State football fans across the world are going to be scrutinizing it.
That's for sure. This is not a place where you can hide. This is a university where there's going to be a very bright spotlight. There's not going to be any shadows to hide in, and Ryan Day will get his trial by fire. But you hit the nail on the head when we talked about the people that are in place. The infrastructure that Urban Meyer leaves behind is set up for Ryan Day to succeed. Now, a lot of that will have to do with what the coaching staff changes look like in the off season. this was, I would say last Tuesday I was a little, I was surprised, but I was surprised by things that I didn't know about. I was surprised that, Urban Meyer pointed out, he pointed at the, things got difficult for him as of the surgery in 2014, but he said really where it hit him and he started to think about maybe having to give it up was the Penn State game last year. And that was sort of the focal point of the renewal of thinking about getting out of the game and preserving his health because the the pain is and the aggravation caused by the stress of the job aggravates his condition, and we didn't really hear much about it last year in terms of the headaches. It really kind of surfaced earlier this year, and people started to dig deeper into it, and the media started to get more of an interest in it. But I can't count on the I would need a calculator to try to keep track of all of the times that we heard the word cyst this year. But that kind of surprised me. I didn't realize the extent of what he was going through. And although we had heard about his brain early in the year, and then things started to seem a little okay in the middle of the year. And of course, he said he was intending to return, and then things started to get bad again, and eventually he made the choice that he's got to step away. And it was interesting to hear how at peace he sort of seemed with it, and how you touched on it, how complimentary he was of having a coach of Ryan Day's caliber available to hand off to and to leave the program in a good place.
And you brought up about how painful and challenging this past season was. I heard an interview with former Ohio State linebacker Joshua Perry, and this is something that you referenced the headaches being an issue last year in 2017 during the Penn State game. In this interview with Joshua Perry, I completely forgot. But as soon as Joshua Perry mentioned it in this interview, he talked about during the 2014 national championship season, specifically during the spring practices, up at practice, and he was wearing a baseball cap. And when you think about it, you rarely see Urban Meyer wearing a baseball cap, if at all. Mm-hmm. And it was at the beginning of spring practice, and he talked about how he had a procedure done on this, and Urban Joshua Perry, said something that I remember. Joshua Perry talked about him showing up wearing the baseball cap, and I remember, seeing wearing the, and he talked about how I'm fine, procedure. Well, Joshua Perry in the same interview said that Urban Meyer didn't blow a whistle during practice because the pain that it would cause to his hand was that severe. Mm-hmm. And that was back in 2014. So the point I'm trying to raise is that, I can't even imagine, like what can be minor to somebody can be excruciatingly major to somebody else, and vice versa. You don't know until you're the one in it. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly, let's face it. I'm not trying to minimize anything that involves the brain as being something minor, and the fact that Urban Meyer has dealt with this for over 20 years. It's been something that he was diagnosed. We were just talking about when he was an assistant and moving into the head coaching ranks. It's something he's dealt with and tried to manage over, throughout his college coaching career. And I just think, as you said, the fact that he has somebody that is very capable, very confident, very up to the task on staff
And again, I think of, when I think the circumstances are entirely different. I'm not trying to take us into a different direction. We talk about like the no head coaching experience. When we compare and contrast this to when Jim Tressel was forced out and Luke Fickell was promoted into the head coaching position without any head coaching experience, you compare and contrast the health and status of the program. Not that Jim Tressel was a bad coach or that he ran a bad program, but the perception, the health of the program back in May of 2011 versus December of 2018 is night and day. No pun intended. So that's I just think that I'm going to give Gene Smith and Urban Meyer the benefit of the doubt. And I think Ryan Day, the fact that he has such a strong personal relationship with so many of the returning players that are going to comprise the 2019 team, he has been personally involved in the recruiting of so many of the incoming recruiting class. I think it made complete sense when you take a step back. The last thing Ohio State needed was added disruption, and the continuity of the infrastructure, the continuity of the recruiting class. That's why the decision was made to promote from within.
Yes, and I will point out he's the rosiest cheeked Buckeye since Aaron Kraft.
That's true. And that's just an added bonus.
Exactly. No, I trust Gene Smith's hires. I mean, when I watch the basketball team and see what Chris Holtman's been able to do in his 2 years, and I mean, Gene is obviously the guy who brought in Urban Meyer, and you go back even before that, and Thad Matta and that kind of thing, and it's like, these are solid hires. He's earned the benefit of the doubt. Ryan Day seems capable of doing the job. The only thing that we have left to do is to see how he handles his staff in the offseason. I would think there's got to be some changes. I would say without the personal relationship that Urban has with the basically the consensus quote unquote worst coach on the staff in Bill Davis, I would think that maybe Bill Davis's days are numbered. He was not Ryan Day's best man. He was Urban Meyer's best man. Greg Schiano has expressed some interest in the Temple head coaching job, and I think that after last year getting basically being offered the Tennessee job and then having it yanked away as it was in that fashion. I think you've seen two now off seasons where Schiano's looked for head coaching gigs. It would be surprising to see him come back. So that just leaves the rest of the staff. One guy we know who will be back is Brian Hartline, who was they had the interim tag removed from his interim coach title, and most deservedly so, because Brian Hartline's position group grew exponentially better than any other group on the team.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and a compliment to Brian Hartline, without having ever met him, without having any interaction with Brian Hartline. I think even Urban Meyer acknowledged the fact that for somebody like Brian Hartline, who was an accomplished player at the collegiate level as well as the professional level, for him to come in with the kind of hunger and intensity at let's just say, the graduate assistant level that he was at last season, which gave Ohio State, let's face it, the way that everything was in the off season, the way that Brian Hartline was promoted, Ohio State was very, very fortunate to have such a capable and skilled individual in Brian Hartline, ready to take that position. But Brian Hartline, instead of just kind of coasting, instead of just kind of taking a laissez-faire approach to it, showed, I'm just going to say, Ryan Day, that he was worthy of being the permanent wide receivers coach. So congratulations to Brian Hartline for a well-deserved promotion. If now he has set, let's just say it, he has set the bar for himself quite high with the performance of the wide receivers in 2018. It's one thing to have one good year, but it's completely another to keep it going. So we're certainly looking forward to continued stellar play from the Zone 6 group.
Absolutely, and he'll have his work cut out for him with losing several players from his wide receiver room this offseason as guys will go pro, both because they have used up their eligibility or because they are somebody maybe like KJ Hill who is ready to take that next step in their career. Brian Hartline, not only technique wise and X's and O's wise, improving his position group, but also you don't coach at Ohio State if you can't recruit. So he's obviously showed some skill at that as well. So as you said, kudos to Brian Hartline, a well-deserved bump in title and I'm sure pay. And it looks like at least one solid position is filled quite nicely on Ryan Day's staff. I am looking with some interest to see if certainly Larry Johnson has a job as long as he wants one. I'm anxious to see if he sticks around or if he decides this is a good time to retire. Hopefully he will stick around because he is one of the best in the entire nation. But there are some positions that I think will be looked at. I certainly think that it appears Greg Schiano will be on his way out. We don't know for sure that Ryan Day will replace Bill Davis, although we can hope for that. There's guys like Kevin Wilson who you just aren't sure. I mean, certainly if he gets a head coaching offer, he would probably go. But, what do you think in terms of the coaching staff is going to shake out this offseason?
You are asking a very legitimate question that I'm stammering to articulate it well. I am going into this with my eyes wide open and the expectation that nothing will surprise me. And I realize that that's just kind of opening me up for a complete, a complete possibility of anything and everything. Certainly, I think Ryan Day has, and he should have, as the new head coach of Ohio State, have the flexibility to make staff changes as he deems necessary for the success of his program and Ohio State's future successes on the field. I completely agree with you. I think Larry Johnson has earned the right to make the decision to go whenever he decides to, because let's face it, Larry Johnson has had a successful career spanning not just his time here at Ohio State, but his previous stops at Penn State. He is widely acknowledged as the best, if not the best, one of the best defensive line coaches in the entire country. He is definitely a magnet for pulling in top line defensive line recruits all across the country. But maybe he might look at it as, something, I've done everything that I want to. I've been able to earn a national championship ring here. I'm ready to kind of hang it up. I'm certainly hoping he sticks around. Bill Davis, his security blanket is leaving. Fairly or unfairly, Urban Meyer had made the decision to hire Bill Davis. I'm not sure if he's going to survive. I certainly agree that Greg Schiano is a likely candidate to leave. And as far as on the secondary, I'm of the opinion that the secondary coaches are going to remain intact with Alex Grinch, with Tabor Johnson, but that remains to be seen. I'm certainly hoping that Kevin Wilson stays for the simple fact that it seems as though there was some good chemistry between Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson. Maybe I'm being maybe I'm oversimplifying, but I would hope that would help in terms of that precious continuity that we were talking about earlier. We just talked about Brian Hartline, Greg Studrawa. I know that there are some people who are very unhappy with the play of the offensive line, but it certainly seems as though Greg Studrawa and Ryan Day, in terms of the way that they would have worked, with Day being the offensive coordinator, Studrawa being the offensive line coach, that maybe that that continuity is important to Ryan Day. So if there are going to be changes, I'm going to, and this is going to not going to be a bold statement by any stretch, I certainly anticipate them being more so on the defensive side of the ball. I will merely say on the recruiting side of things, and I realize we're a couple weeks out from the early signing period, that who's to say that some of the recruits that Ohio State is hoping to get their coveted signature in December, that they might withhold signing with Ohio State until after the Rose Bowl. I mean, like those relationships with coaches can be some of the main contributions to why somebody signs with a school. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the right mindset, but to some recruits that can be the reason. Like if Larry Johnson retires, if Bill Davis is fired, believe it or not, I've heard rumblings that Cade Stover who's one of the prize recruits of 2019, get verbal commitment. I've heard rumblings that Cade Stover is absolutely, wanting Bill Davis to be his coach. Okay. What do? Do you string Cade Stover along, or do you know what I'm saying? Like, I really don't know how you handle that well. I just think that, that old cliche of, well, you don't choose a school because of the coach. You have to I think you have to, this is where we're going to see how good Ryan Day can placate any concerns or issues that recruits have about their future position coaches.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We already saw, I believe it was a 2020 recruit who said, Urban's retiring changed everything for him, and he opened up his commitment. But there's those relationships. Those relationships with the coaches that recruit you are important, and you hope that the kids have open minds, and when the next coach comes to visit, to say, we still, we value you. We want you as part of the class. We need you, and we all value you. It wasn't just this one particular coach. That can be a I guess we're going to get a good early look at what Ryan Day and his staff will be like moving forward in terms of how they keep the class together. So I think Tony Alford is a guy is interesting. I mean, he's got that very strange title, assistant head coach for offense. He's the running backs coach. I think he's probably a safe bet to stay if he wants to stay. Alex Grinch is interesting because he was one of the hottest names in the country, but the defense so underperformed this year, and you just don't know, was it just a poor matchup, a poor marriage with him and Schiano?
Right.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, I think during the press conference, and I don't have it in front of me, but Ryan Day, he didn't have a lengthy statement, but he talked about how the defense would attack and be simple, or in so many words. And some people kind of interpreted that as a shot across the bow at Greg Schiano, that maybe he overcomplicated the defense. And, I go back to, I mean, you and I, we've been Ohio State fans long enough that we can remember previous coaching transitions. And I think back to when John Cooper was fired and Jim Tressel was elevated, and that was a couple week period, which is kind of, again, different circumstances. There was no early signing period, and Ohio State was willing to take their lumps in terms of possible recruiting losses. And Jim Tressel, he made the conscientious effort of keeping people like Tim Spencer and Bill Conley on staff from the John Cooper regime, while also bringing in people like Mark D'Antonio and Mark Snyder and other coaches like Mel Tucker, who's now at the head coach of Colorado. And Bill Conley was left to try to sell Ohio State without really knowing who was the head coach until Jim Tressel was named to that position. And like we said, when Jim Tressel was forced out, Luke Fickell was able to bring in a lot of Ohio kids to kind of fill out that 2012 class. And Urban Meyer, as soon as he was hired, kids were thinking, I want to go play for Urban Meyer. So, between now and the early signing period, it's going to be interesting to see. My personal suspicion is between now and the early signing period, it would not surprise me if the Ohio State recruiting class for 2019 kind of turned a little more local in their focus, not to take anything away from the nationally ranked prospects, but for Ryan Day to kind of concentrate more and more on the Ohio prospects to try and, if you will, calm the waters of concern that might be out there amongst the players who are concerned about the future direction of the program. I think there are a lot of Ohio kids who are secretly harboring desires to be Ohio State Buckeyes, and Ryan Day, despite him not having any previous head coaching experience, the opportunity to become an Ohio State Buckeye is going to weigh heavily on their mind.
Yeah, Chip, I want to go on record with saying I'm okay if they want to bring in Mark D'Antonio to be defensive coordinator again.
There you go. Okay, I'm with you. I second that.
I'll even say that I'm okay with Mike Tressel coming in and being linebackers coach.
Or how about Marcus Freeman, as was suggested by some other noted people on the Ozone?
It wouldn't be the worst hire, I would say.
Certainly.
Yeah. So it's going to be the most interesting part of the off season between now and the spring games to see, first of all, how the recruiting class holds together, and second of all, how the coaching staff evolves under Ryan Day in his first off season before taking over for his first official NCAA season at Ohio State. Chip, before we get out of here, a couple other little things that we probably could talk about. The Rose Bowl uniforms unveiled. Ohio State will be wearing scarlet. You good with that?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime that you have an opportunity to wear scarlet, I know that there are a lot of people who are concerned about the fact that they're not wearing the scarlet jerseys with the gray sleeves that I have come to know and love. But anytime Ohio State gets to wear scarlet, this would be, and I believe it was Tom Orr. I don't want to be mistaken. I thought Tom wrote an article about this would be the first time that Ohio State has been in the Rose Bowl since the 1980 Rose Bowl that Ohio State's wearing their scarlet jerseys. They traditionally, when they've been in the Rose Bowl, they've usually worn their away or their white jerseys. Mm-hmm. So this is the first time in a long while that Ohio State will have the opportunity to wear their scarlet jerseys.
My favorites, I would like them to go back to the giant numbers that they used to have, though.
Certainly. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I mean, I did have to chuckle when I heard Gerd and Tom talk about, of course, they've got to bust out their scarlet pony cleats, and Tom, I agree with Tom. Yeah, they'll probably, many an ankle would be broken if that was the case, from, like the early 90s footwear. But I wasn't as I've always been a traditionalist. You've heard me say that over and over. I've always been a traditionalist with the idea of like black cleats anyway. But certainly the scarlet jerseys, bring back the giant numbers, and let's get some gray on those sleeves.
Sounds good to me. Also wanted to congratulate Jordan Fuller on being named an academic All-American this year. It's quite an honor.
Certainly. The fact that Jordan Fuller, he is one of those guys that he's a junior, so he's technically eligible to leave for the NFL. Please don't go. Please, 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 because I have no idea in terms of his NFL draft evaluation. I certainly would not want to stand in the way of Jordan Fuller's NFL aspirations, but he would leave a significant void in the secondary in 2019 if he left. So I'm certainly hoping that Jordan Fuller comes back. but congratulations on a well-deserved honor.
Yeah, the main reason I would like to see Jordan Fuller back is that in the last 2 Michigan games, he has 2 interceptions.
The guy can play.
Yeah.
I mean, he is dependable. I think one of the best plays of his career was, we talked earlier about the 2017 game against Penn State, and he had a crucial tackle against current New York Giants phenom Saquon Barkley. He prevented a long play, a run that could have gone for a long play, by coming up and making a tackle near the line of scrimmage. So not only his interception skills, but his abilities as an open field tackler are well respected.
Yeah, Fuller's one of those guys who it's like huge news when he misses a tackle, because it rarely happens. He is you might have to go all the way back to Antoine Winfield to find a secondary player for Ohio State that tackles as well in space as he does.
That's a very good comparison. And anytime you can be mentioned in the same breath as Antoine Winfield, you know that you're in very elite company within Ohio State football history.
Well, Chip, before we get out of here, is there anything else you want to discuss? Maybe Micah Potter transferring to Wisconsin or something like that?
I wish him nothing but the best. Anytime somebody transfers, regardless of what sport we're talking about, you only wish the best for any young man or young woman. You want them to be happy. You want them to be successful. Certainly looking forward to watching Micah's brother, who is one of those probable early signing guys in the next couple weeks, seeing him play for the Buckeyes, but wish him nothing but the best at Wisconsin.
Yeah, except when they play Ohio State.
Certainly.
May
the bricks be aplenty when that happens.
I always get concerned when guys transfer within the conference and you have to face them, and even sometimes when you have to face them when they transfer out of conference. I remember, I know you're not the hugest basketball guy for Ohio State, but I remember quite clearly when Derek Anderson transferred to Kentucky, and then Ohio State played Kentucky, and it was just torture watching him score points against the Buckeyes.
But of course, you certainly did not have those same kind of qualms or concerns when Lawrence Funderburk transferred from Indiana to Ohio State, right?
Well, that's the natural order of things, Chip. That you would expect that.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, you have to evolve. You have to let guys evolve like that. I guess the last thing I want to touch on is the utter surprise that I had. This is not a slight. I'm just saying I was utterly surprised by Michael Jordan's appearance on some All-American lists. I thought that Jordan did okay. I didn't think he was tremendous this year. I mean, certainly we've been spoiled in recent years. I mean, you think about the Corey Linsleys and the Nick Mangolds and the Billy Prices and the Jacoby Borans and the Pat Elflines, and then you throw Michael Jordan's name in there, and it doesn't seem to go alongside of them. But here's a guy who was a first-team SI.com All-American and second-team for Walter Camp Football Foundation, and it was kind of surprising to me. How did you react to the news?
No, you're not the only one. Maybe the criteria for center evaluation is a little different, and I'm not trying to besmirch a young man who is going to get his own Buckeye tree and plaque in the Buckeye Grove. But yeah, it was surprising. I was under the impression that come 2019, Michael Jordan's going to move back to guard. So that kind of makes me wonder, maybe I'm mistaken. So, yeah, I'm with you. I thought Michael Jordan, I thought he was serviceable at center, but I certainly believe that his future position at the next level is going to be at guard, where he truly excelled.
Yeah, and I would like somebody to seize that center position so that Jordan could play a guard.
Well, it might happen this spring, because there are certainly, if Ohio State can hold on to all of their talented recruits that they are expected to sign in December, as well as some of the players that, for example, they redshirted, or who's to say that come spring ball that maybe they determine that of the 5 best players, Michael Jordan would be better suited at guard, where he was dominant his first 2 years.
Absolutely, and a new head coach might have a different opinion.
Certainly, as well as they're allowed to.
Yeah. So, all right, before we get out of here, you and I are going to come back, I guess, after the Christmas holiday. We're going to preview the Rose Bowl. I'm going on vacation, and so we won't have a show next week, but we'll have a show between Christmas and New Year's to talk about Ohio State and Washington. We'll break that that matchup down for everyone. Before we get out of here, though, I mean, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Twitter at Chip Minnich. My last name is spelled Minnicch. And like Michael, I'm a contributor to the Hayes and Cannon section of the ozone.net, as well as a contributor to Athlon Sports. And I'm just going to put an early Christmas request to you, besides talking about the Rose Bowl, because by this time we will know who is signed and who is not. If we can also plug in to talk about the newly inked 2019 recruiting class as well.
Oh, absolutely. We'll definitely talk about that. Maybe we can find a special guest to come on and break down the recruiting class and the numbers and all that for us. That'd be good to maybe do that as well. So we'll definitely talk about that. We'll definitely talk about the Washington Huskies, and that's going to be an exciting matchup. It's kind of sad that we only have one more football game to talk about this season, but it is the natural way of things that every season must come to an end, Chip.
Oh, but that's why, like I said, it's like that's why you've got to savor it. You have to savor it just like a fine meal or a fine beverage, whatever you got it, because it goes so fast. I mean, the anticipation is always, it's almost unbearable, at least for me, during the summer. And then when it gets here, it just goes by in the blink of an eye. And I realize I'm talking to you from frigid Ohio, and I have no idea what the temperature is for you down there. I can tell you that it's in the balmy 30s right now. So, as I said, I always cherish every Ohio State football season, no matter how frustrating sometimes they can be. I always cherish them, and I'm always regretting their conclusion.
Well, it's 48 here right now, Chip, and that it doesn't sound bad to you, but if you've spent more than a year in this climate, it feels like about mid-30s. That's what it feels like when you go outside.
Well,
you're
okay. Well, it is. I can tell you, it is 30. It is 30. It is. It's so. And right now, I have no idea if Santa's going to have snow on Christmas, but it certainly seems trending in that direction.
Well, good for you having a white Christmas. I haven't had one of those in quite some time. But folks, we definitely would love for you to leave us a review on iTunes. It's been a while since anybody's done that. Of course, your star ratings are welcome. We can get in front of more people if you give us ratings on iTunes. So please do that, and we would appreciate that. Of course, we would encourage you to read our stuff at theozone.net. Season being over, I'm going to have to find some things to write about. The grumpy old Buckeye will return for the Rose Bowl, of course. But if I have other things to contribute, I'll have to give some thought to that. How other ways that I can maybe contribute moving forward. It'll be really fun to do a grumpy old Buckeye for the spring game. I'll tell you that. We encourage you to listen to all the other stuff on the Ozone Radio Network. You've got the Buckeye Sloopcast on Monday. You've got us on Tuesday. The Buckeye Weekly Podcast on Wednesday, formerly known as what was it? Across the Field, now known as the Buckeye Weekly.
Yes.
Thursday you've got the Sons of Schmidt, and then on Friday you get another a second dose of the Buckeye Sloopcast. So please tune in to all those shows. They are probably, most of those guys are probably smarter than we are.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, most
that's
of
fair.
We
just won't tell you which ones. How's that? We'll let you figure that out.
Yes,
how's that?
Some are smarter and some are not, and we don't want to make anybody feel bad by pointing it out. Because that would be
very fair.
Yeah. So that'll do it. We'll be back between Christmas and New Year's. We'll do this all again, and I don't have anything to add. You got anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Hey, Merry Christmas.
Absolutely.
And, Happy Festivus.
Yeah.
In the Minnich household, we do celebrate Festivus. And believe it or not, I still, even with my children getting older, like during the airing of grievances and the Feast of Strength, I can still, until my wife intervenes, I'm not pinned. Even though it's like 1 against 3, it takes them all. But sincere best wishes to you on a very Merry Christmas. I hope you have a wonderful vacation with your family. Safe travels.
Thank you.
And looking forward to reconnecting with you after the holidays.
Absolutely. Same to you. Do you have your poll up for Festivus?
Thank you. Absolutely. The Festivus poll is up. Like the airing of grievances, it's like it's always interesting at the Minnich household. But yeah, the fact that we've been celebrating Festivus, I had explained it to my kids, but yeah, it's kind of a I have truly enjoyed that episode of Seinfeld. Obviously, the fact that we have a Festivus poll kind of makes us unique within the pantheon of my children's friends. Interesting conversation piece, needless to say.
Yeah, I'll bet. All right, so happy holidays to all of our listeners. Chip, I'm looking forward to talking to you about the Washington Huskies next time, but certainly to you and your family have the greatest holiday possible and a nice, safe one. And I we'll be back to talk to you guys again before you know it. And we'll all be full of ham and turkey, and we'll have presents that we've already stopped playing with and all that other stuff. So until next time, we'll just say it like we always say it. Go Bucks!
Go Bucks!